The biggest problem that I've run into in my writing journey is not knowing what goes next. And as I said in the last video, your outline is going to help you avoid this problem, and it's going to help you have the momentum to push forward, and it's going to make sure your pacing's on track, your character arcs are there. But it's important to go ahead and think of the structure as a whole and consider what's going to come while you're planning one part of the structure, and it'll get easier the more you do it. This is going to be the first plot point that I mentioned in those 5 beats that are really important, and that is going to be what is sometimes called the opening image. It's called the introduction. Some people call it the hook, and this is really just getting your readers to engage with the main character or your protagonist. So you're going to introduce them in some way that is compelling. You are going to make sure that you've established what their lie is, what they misbelieve about the world, and you're going to establish how that's messing up their life and it's causing them problems. It might be getting in the way of what they want, or at least what they believe that they want, and you're going to show what they want. This does not all have to happen in this one section. There's a beat later on, and you're going to do these in the next few scenes that happen before the inciting incident, especially. In this first beat, think of it as the first thing that you're going to see. If it was like a movie, it'd be that first shot. And it's really just going to establish who your character is, why your readers should relate to them or care in some way. Your character doesn't necessarily need to be likable, but they do need to be relatable and compelling in some way. Overall, you want to show what isn't right in their life. The reader should be getting a hint that something isn't right, because they will notice if it's missing. You need to hint at the journey that they are going to go on. That way they have some investment in them. They understand what they're putting their time and effort into reading and following along with. Normally, this beat is going to be visual, so you want to focus on showing versus telling. And yes, telling does have its place in the writing world. You've probably heard the term show, don't tell. But there is a place for telling, you just need to know when it is. But this beat is all about showing. You want to immerse your readers in your point of view character's head, their world, what they're struggling with, and you want to show what their internal conflict is, what they're going to be battling this entire book. What do you want to think about with this beat? What is your character's misbelief and what is their lie? How is that interacting with what they want? What do they want? What do they think is going to make them happy? What are their flaws? Are they on display? Can your readers pinpoint them? How is this opening image going to be indicative of who your character is and who they might become? Is it interesting? Does it spark curiosity? Will it keep the reader riveted enough to get to the inciting incident, the exciting beat? And when your character finally gets to the inciting incident, are your readers going to know why it matters to them? And that really is the biggest part that I want to emphasize about story and story structure. Yes, you want to outline your plot and you want to know what your plot is, but you always want to tap back into who your character is and why this matters, why it affects them the way it does. Because the heart of your story is going to be your character and who they are as a person. Otherwise, the plot could just be happening, and why is your reader going to care? It's kind of like the difference between being in like a historical event and reading about it in a textbook. And a lot of that is because we don't have a personal stake in what's happening. We don't have something we can relate with or empathize with generally. The next beat that you want to think about, if you have another point of view character, introducing them / the love interest. However, you can go ahead and mesh this with another beat that I'm going to talk about, the meet cute. In this beat, you kind of want to establish the same things as the previous beat. You want to make sure that it's an interesting introduction. For every new character, you want to make sure their introduction is interesting or compelling, unless it's the minor characters we talked about in this video. But really, you want to have the reader thinking about, why would this pairing work? Why do we care about this character? And you want to establish, especially if you're doing multiple point of views and a romantic love interest arc, you want to establish the characters and who they are before they're together. Because as I said in the last week's video, it's very important for them to change individually before they can change as a partner, even though they will have some influence on making those changes occur. Now, if you aren't writing a romance and you aren't writing multiple point of views, you can skip this beat. As I said in the last video, some of these can be kind of like extra beats. Modify this as you need, or if you feel like something doesn't click with you, it doesn't feel right for your story, experiment with taking it out. The next beat you want to think about is generally called the setup. In the setup, it's multiple scenes, so it's starting from the opening image or the introduction, and it's going to the inciting incident. This I got from Save the Cat, which if you guys haven't read that book, you should totally check it out. It's incredibly helpful. But basically, in this stretch of the novel, before the inciting incident, you want to introduce your main characters, you want to introduce your supporting characters, and you want to introduce the misbeliefs, the flaws, the wants, and basically give the readers a feeling of where the story is going. You are establishing the status quo. That way they understand where the change is coming from. If you start your story at the inciting incident and you don't have anything explaining why this is so impactful for your character, it won't hit as hard. They won't understand why this is forcing a change. So things to ask yourself for this beat. Have you shown what the status quo is? And have you shown what's wrong with it? And you also want to think about showing your character in multiple aspects of their life. This is because we are not always the same person around different people. We are always ourselves, but we swap out masks. So, for example, I'm going to be very different with my boss at work than I am with my best friend I've known since like kindergarten. So some examples of these is you want to show your character at home generally, so how they are with their family, or if they don't have a family, you want to show that because you want to hint at their relationships and how that has influenced them, how they are with other people that they love, their closest people. You want to show them at what is called work, and this can be an actual job, or it can be, if they're like a high school student, it would be their school life. Basically their responsibilities. And you also want to think about showing them at play. Who are they and how are they reacting when they're just being themselves, just going out and having fun and hanging out? What do they do in their downtime? Do not take this as writing a scene that has nothing to do with the story. You still want all of it to connect. And really it's just showing the different facets of the character so the reader can better understand what's wrong and what needs to be fixed, and then why that's going to have to change depending on the inciting incident that's going to happen. Another very important thing before we get into the next main plot point, you want to make sure you've established a goal for your character. Okay, now this goal is probably going to shift or change depending on the inciting incident, but if you don't have a goal at the beginning of the story, there's not going to be anything driving your character forward. And it's going to be very flat, very passive, and it probably won't be very engaging. It won't give you much place to go. And when you're asking yourself how your character would react and why they would think this or do this, it's not going to work. Okay. And then the next beat is that second main beat that I talked about in the last video, and that is the inciting incident. It is sometimes called the catalyst. And then this is also generally a meet cute moment, which you can either have here or you can have somewhere in the setup section, depending on if you're writing a straight romance or if you're using these kind of romantic subplot beats to go ahead and help with and interweaving character relationships. So the inciting incident is what is going to force your character to start on the path of change. We talked about it a little bit in the last video, but I wanted to give you some things to think about for this section specifically, some questions to ask yourself. Why does the inciting incident matter to your main character or your protagonist? Why does it matter specifically to them? Why is it going to affect them the way it is rather than just the way it would affect everybody? How does it push them outside their comfort zone? How does it force them to change and shift what they're doing and how they're doing it? What conflict is going to arise because of this inciting incident or catalyst? Also note that the inciting incident doesn't have to be like someone died or a bomb went off or the aliens invaded. It should be bad and catastrophic to your character, but it can appear to be a good thing, but it's actually going to be a very bad thing. The main thing that you want the inciting incident to do is to disrupt the status quo, because the status quo is what is keeping them trapped in their misbelief and in their flaws. It's stopping them from being the better person that they can be. This will, of course, change depending on the arc that you're talking about, which if you want to know more about those, you can check this video out here. But for the purposes of this video, I'm probably mostly going to be talking about the positive arc that is probably the most well-known. The next beat that you want to think about is sometimes called the debate beat, or I like to call it the impossible choice or question. And basically what this is going to do is you've established the status quo for your readers and your character. And basically, they're going to have the option to stay in the status quo and continue to be miserable and continue to have that flaw that is ruining their life without them realizing it, or they can shift their goal and their method of getting that goal and move forward, stepping outside of their comfort zone, doing something they probably normally wouldn't do to achieve their goal and improve their life. Remember, they're going after their want, which is actually not what they need, but they think it's what's going to make them happy. If you want to know more about that, you can check out this video here. This can also, if your character, for whatever reason, in the inciting incident made a decision already, they're already doing something else, this can also sometimes be a preparation beat. So think of like in Lord of the Rings, they've had the council, they've decided they're going to go take the ring to Mordor. This is in itself a type of preparation beat if you are looking at the character arc of anyone in the Fellowship, like Legolas, Gimli. So after that council, now that they've decided to go do the thing and take the ring to Mordor, they have to prepare for that journey. They had to get supplies, they had to make sure they said their goodbyes, most likely. I will say, however, having some sort of decision-making element in this beat is going to make your story more active, just because they actively have to choose what they're doing, how they're stepping forward, how they're moving forward, versus the preparation scene and gathering the supplies, gathering the allies. This can sometimes be a little boring if you don't write it correctly, so just keep that in mind. A note about the meet cute. In this beat, for the romance part of it, you have the two main characters interacting together, the two love interests interacting together, and they're generally brought together by external forces or by chance or life event, and it's just you starting the chemistry between them. You're letting the readers know that there's something going to happen here. You want them to start rooting for these characters now. Even if this is actually a meet hate instead of a meet cute, if you're writing an enemies to lover, you want to make sure that you establish that they really don't like each other. Some tips for this: you want to make it memorable, both for the characters and also the readers. It's that moment that they are going to always think about. You want to hint at how these characters are going to be good for each other and why now is very much not the time for it. There should be some idea of conflict between them, a reason why they can't just get together now, whether you're doing enemies to lovers or just strangers to lovers. You want to establish that there's something in the way, which is going to be part of them overcoming things and defeating those obstacles. The next plot point is going to be about how your character is reacting to the inciting incident. And a lot of times this kind of meshes with the debate beat. This is also a beat that you can use in your romance arc if you're writing one, and it's basically one or both of the characters having some form of them saying, this isn't going to happen, I'm not going to fall in love, I'm not going to make this connection or form these connections for whatever reason. And it's just letting them say it's going to not happen now or ever, and especially not with the love interest character that they met. You need to know what the reason that they are not going to fall in love is, or why they don't feel like they're going to, or whatever this beat is for. And you want to understand how your character is going to react to the inciting incident given their misbelief about themselves or the world around them. This leads us to the next beat, which is an optional beat. Sometimes I add it, sometimes I don't. I got this one from Abby Emmons and her 3-act story structure. It's a pinch point moment, and you can put these throughout your story, in my opinion. But it's basically just you hinting at the antagonist of the story. If you're writing a hero-villain tale, you're going to hint at something that the villain's doing. This is going to end Act 1 of our story. Take what you will from it. Go ahead and pick and choose which beats are helpful for you. Just keep in mind those main beats that we talked about in the last video. Until next time.